This is Writers on Film, the only podcast dedicated to books on cinema. Hello everybody and welcome to Writers on Film. My name is John Bleasdale. I am a writer, a film critic, a poet, an adventurer, a lover, a peacock and a monkey. Um, and I'm joined today, I just wanted to mix it up a little bit there. Sorry, Daniel. I'm joined today by Daniel Kraus, who has written what I think is going to be the definitive book about one of the most famous, if not the most famous, horror film, certainly in the post-war years, Night of the Living Dead, directed by George Romero. Thank you for joining me, Daniel.
No problem. Thanks.
Can you give our listeners an idea first of I mean, you say in the book how you first encountered Night of the Living Dead, and I think that sort of formative experience is kind of important to your relationship with the film.
Sure. I think I encountered it as most people in my generation anyway encountered it to some extent, which is just on TV,
Mm.
because of its kind of infamous copyright issues, among other things. It was just played on TV all the time. Um, the difference, if there is any, for me, is that I saw it really young. I saw it at 5 years old. Um, but I've found, as this book has gotten closer to coming out, that it's not as unusual as I thought. Most people encounter it a little older, but it's not uncommon for people to say I first saw it at age 8 or 9 or something like that. Um, and it was, horror was something I shared with my mom, or my mom shared with me, probably more accurately. Um, and we would watch Twilight Zone every Friday, and then Night of the Living Dead when it was on, which it often was.
Mm.
So that was it was really the first movie that made an impact on me. The first movie I really remember seeing. And obviously today I'm still watching it. And it has changed my life multiple times. Or if that's too dramatic, has at least been there for me at different points in my life in different ways and has protected me and educated me and done a lot of things for me over the years.
Because it's interesting that you say in the book, I'd like to be remembered for my epic novel,
Hmm.
but the chances are I'm going to be remembered for, and you have a career that is inspired, and also you participated with Romero on novels and
Yep.
works, and Guillermo del Toro as well. Tell us a little bit about your career as well, and how Night of the Living Dead influenced those decisions.
Well, I mean, I don't know how far back you want to go. I mean, it started in first grade, really writing. My career as sort of a novelist
Mm.
started maybe 17 years ago. Um, and as you said, I had the great honor of being asked to finish The Living Dead, which was an epic zombie novel that Romero had started and had been working on for many years, but was nowhere near finishing when he died. And I was able to sort of work with his estate and finish the book. And then in the doing of that, discovered a second novel that he had written about half of called Pay the Piper, which I then finished that too. So my professional relationship with Ramiro, although I had met him before,
Mm.
briefly, in a very non-professional way, just sort of casually, really my professional engagement with him has been posthumous. Like it was, I've gotten to know his wife and family, since then, but I was brought in just because I was someone who, as you mentioned, I had collaborated with Guillermo a couple times, and I think I was sort of a known collaborator, and they knew his wife and manager, Romero's wife and manager, knew that I was this big Romero student in a lot of ways. I'd been kind of studying him my whole life. So I made some degree of sense to work with those manuscripts. And how does he influence me? Well, it's so deep that it's hard to register.
Mm.
Like it's when I was starting on The Living Dead and talking to his wife Suze and learning about him as a person, it was remarkable, particularly once I got into the manuscript, like how little I had to adjust. You know, when you have two authors, you're never going to agree on everything. So there's going to be some friction and some collaboration and compromise and all those things. But it was remarkable how much I didn't have to do that. Like I think his seeing his movies at a young age, mostly night, but then as I got older, dawn and day especially, um, how much they influenced just my worldview.
Mm,
You know, like in so many ways. It was almost as if he was like my dad in a way. He was passing down the things he believed, and so many of those are ingrained in me, not just in like the art that I produce, but just in the way I sort of conduct myself and my opinions on things, like political or whatnot. They're sort of very much in the Romero mold. So yeah, he. I don't know that there's another figure, parents included, who has influenced me as much.
right, right. It's so fitting that it's posthumous as well, given the zombie nature
Yeah,
of
I've
the
thought of
movie
that too.
dead.
It's interesting. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. The sort of life goes on, and sometimes we use that phrase negatively, like zombie ideas or anything. But here it's
sure.
obviously a positive one. Um, I-
Well, and Romero always thought of the zombies positively. Like he never referred to the zombies as a plague or anything. It was always an uprising of a new age sort of taking over. So that makes sense too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always interested by zombies as their sort of social significance. Especially when The Walking Dead came up, and I was thinking of it as being this kind of fear of economic downturn, and this
Hmm.
is what happens when consumerism goes. Well, consumerism obviously in Romero as well is explicitly made a subject
Yeah.
of one of the sequels. I wanted to ask why you chose this particular sort of way of doing the. Oh, it's almost like a DVD commentary in text form.
Yeah.
What motivated that idea?
Right. It's kind of like 100 DVD commentaries of the movie all at once. Right.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
but it moves that way. It moves chronologically, shot by shot through the film.
Well, that's how I read it. I read it with the film on,
Oh
and
wow.
pausing it and then reading the
You would
bit,
have
and
had
then
to pause just constantly.
yeah, I
Because
know.
sometimes chapters will only cover 10 seconds of the movie. So like that must have been a workout for your pause button. Uh, but yeah, it's I didn't nothing about this book was intentional at the very beginning. I think I thought I was writing an essay, like a personal essay,
Right.
um, of no particular length, probably short. I don't know. And because I was doing it like between other obligations and I had a few hours to kill, I just brought up the movie on YouTube and just started it. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just start something, my first impression. And I watched a few seconds of the movie and stopped it and said, and wrote about those few seconds. And then after I'd gotten through the credit sequence and I was already 50 pages, I was like, okay, I've got a ton to say about this. I wonder how long I can keep this up. Could I do the whole movie this way? Will I run out of things to say? So it was sort of an accident that I came upon this sort of front to back kind of method. But I immediately liked the idea of um, doing it in that way. So tangents became like a feature and not a bug.
Mm,
So that every time I went on a tangent, it was sort of like it made sense as a tangent because you had a through line of the movie. Like you had a start and beginning of the movie, and then I could go on tangents and tangents and tangents. But you could always sort of be comforted by the fact that you're working on this A to Z line. So no matter how far afield I got, I was going to come back to the line, the sort of progress bar at the bottom. And so it made just sort of immediate sense to me as a grounding way to not completely lose myself. I could always come back.
I found it really fascinating, and I really appreciated that structure. And I love the sort of the way it weaves in the making of aspects of the
Mhm.
production, as well as sort of its afterlife. And you talk about Russo. Is it Joe Russo, who's the guy who's part
It's John Russo or
John
Jack
Russo? Yeah,
Russo.
yeah. Who then there's a sort of tussle between him and George about who sort of really has the rights to it, and it
Hmm.
goes on, and that was an interesting story in itself. I wanted to ask you about like the main actor, who his story is really fascinating as
Yeah.
well, because he's obviously this is well, you make the point that he doesn't really have a career because there's only room for two black actors at any one time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Dwayne Jones, who's on the cover of the book. If it, and this book is about everyone who's ever touched Night of the Living Dead in some way. But if there's a main character, I think it's Dwayne Jones,
Mm,
who is this brilliant, brilliant young actor uh, who could, you know, was probably the only person involved with the movie who could have been a major, major star. Um, but like I said, we had Sidney Poitier and sort of Harry Belafonte was sort of rising at that point. So you really just I just feel like the world Hollywood just wasn't ready for a third leading black man. Um, and then so there's this feeling of, well, what happened to him? You know,
mm,
he was so brilliant in this, and he starred in maybe four other movies I think that were very, very small. Most people haven't seen them. Um, and he's great in all of them. Like he's just magnificent in every one. So there was a lot, and he meant a lot to me as a kid. He means even more to me now, just as a man.
mm,
And what happened to him? So to most people's eyes, he just vanished. But there's a whole dramatic, both inspirational and tragic story there that really no one has ever told. That you know, to some degree, I'll say that I don't want to tell you everything in the
sure.
interview, but like to some degree, I'll say that he didn't disappear at all. He was doing incredible, important work and was quite prolific in New York theater space. It's just that theater is sort of ephemeral. Doesn't it's not sitting on a VHS box that we can acquire and watch. So a lot of it, particularly in the black theater movement, is lost um, because it's theater. But we have a lot of record of it in newspaper archives. His name pops up all the time in these theater listings and doing really interesting things. Uh, what makes Dwayne Jones so interesting? Well, there's many things. He was sort of a genius and a consummate artist. But what makes it so interesting is that he turned his back on Night of the Living Dead in a way that no one else did. Like most of the players in Night of the Living Dead to this day, those that are still with us, are quite associated with it and do conventions and sort of keep their association with the tight. But not Dwayne Jones. You know, he basically was like, and there's a quote in the book from him that's like, if you know me, you get to mention Night of the Living Dead once. And that was because he wanted to see, and again, this is a close to a quote, I want to be considered as a complete human being. And he didn't want to be known as just Ben, as this thing he did when he was young. And he wanted to
Mm,
be someone who had higher aspirations. And he lived up to those aspirations. But it is also, at the same time, it is sad because he never did anything nearly as famous. And I don't think I think there's more to it than that, and I go into it in the book. I don't think it's just that he turned his back on it in a high-minded way, which is partially true, but I also think there were hurt feelings there. I
right.
think there was, and I go into this who and why where the hurt feelings were. Um, but there was a sense that, and this was parroted by lots of people involved, that really only George Romero got anything out of Night of the Living Dead. He was the only one who got a career out of it. No one else did.
Mm,
Um, and you could make a very strong argument that if there were only two people who should have got a career, it would have been Romero and Dwayne Jones. So why? What are the things that happened that made that not happen? So there's a lot there, and his story is really fascinating. And part of my hope of the book was to just tell Dwayne Jones's story for the record, and just get it down somewhere, so that he could be sort of noticed again. And all the good that he did do, and he did a lot of good in his life, his short life, um, that we could have a record of that.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the book does a really good version of that, and I think that it wasn't inevitable that he necessarily had to, either disappear completely or only do a career of conventions. I mean, Steve
Right,
McQueen was in The Blob, and
right.
The Blob is a cult movie, and he escaped. It's not the first thing you think of
Yeah,
when you think of Steve McQueen. So,
no,
you
no.
know,
He could have done all that, but the odds were just stacked against a
yeah,
black man in Hollywood at that point.
absolutely.
Um, yeah, it's complicated, and also the all the other movies he starred in, again, there were maybe four of them, were all by black directors. And so
Yeah,
if he
but
was
he's in
if
that vampire movie you
yeah,
mentioned.
there's a couple others, like maybe three others
Hmm.
that he had small roles, and I called them cameos. He wasn't really the main actor. He sort of got these kind of very small roles. But as far as like starring roles, he only worked with black directors, which right there you're cutting out 99% of the films on offer. If he had made a decision, I'm only going to work with black directors, boy, did that cut down his options. And so that alone, you know, you can't make that many films. There weren't that many films getting off the ground.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I want to talk to you as well about the zombies themselves, because of course this is sort of like a genre-defining film. This is, and there aren't that many. You think of sort of Psycho as
Mhm.
defining serial killer films, or Jaws, Revenge of Nature films, and Night of the Living Dead definitely introduces this idea of the zombie. It's already been there in the past, of course, but a modern idea of the zombie, and you're quite specific about this. Even though there's a bit of a fast zombie at the beginning, the real zombie. I think you say, "Oh, this guy here, that's the beginning of the Romero zombie."
Right, right. Yeah.
What are the things? What defines a Romero zombie?
There's a guy who shows up, shortly after the night descends upon the farmhouse, played by there were, hundreds of zombie extras, but this particular zombie was played by a guy named Terry Gindel. And that doesn't mean he was the first one filmed. It's just he's the first one to appear
Mm,
in the movie who I think acts like what all the zombies after him would be called. So I kind of call it the I credit him more than I should, but the Terry Gindel school of zombies is sort of what I call it. And that's just exactly what you think it is. That's the sort of dull-eyed, slow-moving mass sort of lurcher, as opposed to
mm,
the first zombie you see, the most famous zombie, played by Bill Hinsman, who's sort of all over the place. He it does a lot of pretty close to running, and he
mm.
uses tools which Romero would eventually get to in his zombie movies, but certainly not right away. Certainly not on day one of the zombie uprising. So yeah, we see in this movie lots of weird things with zombies. There's a scene where a zombie eats a bug.
Mm.
We never see that again. There's a weird scene where one of the zombies is sort of like wrestling with a snake, and I don't know what that's all about. Like that ever happens again. So they're improvising, and you can really track that through the makeup too. Like one way you can really tell when the scene was filmed was by the zombie makeup, because at the beginning they
Right.
were just doing black around the eyes, and that was it. They kind of looked like the ghosts or whatever from Carnival of Souls, which was made a few years earlier. Look almost the same. But the further they get into the filming, the more extravagant the wounds and the putty. They use this sort of thing called derma wax, which is what undertakers use to sort of recreate faces. Uh, and that got more and more sophisticated as they went. And one of the great late finds that I had to squeeze into the book, in fact, was there's a new, no, the public hasn't seen it yet, but a color 8 millimeter footage was found recently of that. It's described in the book. By the daughter of one of the zombie extras. That doesn't matter right now. Of like a couple minutes of like backstage or whatever you want to call it, footage of like zombies getting their makeup on and stuff. It's only color footage that exists in Night of the Living Dead, and it's so cool to see. And one of the strange things that it reveals, I don't think anyone knew before, was a lot of the zombie makeup was yellow. They
Right.
all have yellow faces. So and maybe some of it was white too, but what looks like kind of white face on film, a lot of it was yellow.
Is that like they've done camera tests and they've just thought, okay, that's the best. That's what looks.
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, they were part of the Latent Image, a commercial production company, so they were shooting film all the time,
Mm,
color and black and white. They probably knew just instinctively by that point what read as what on film,
right.
and they knew that okay, if you paint someone with this shade of yellow, it's going to look real sickly and pale or whatever.
Yeah, I remember on Mississippi Burning, they had to use a certain color for all the sets because they painted the sets this color because he could then use a certain stock of film which made the
Mm.
black skin look good.
Oh,
So
interesting.
so
Yeah.
it's sort of like to do that revealed the anyway, that's getting off the the path. There's a steep learning curve in the film as people as it goes on, and you're what's also kind of one of the many delights is reading about sort of continuity mistakes and all these sort of aspects that you have. I particularly love there's a bit where you actually can see Romero's fingers as he's basically
Yeah.
faking a swish pan shot.
Yeah, my favorite error in the movie is that one. Which
Right.
I guess it's an error. It takes place when Barbara first enters the room, the den that has all the animal heads on the wall, and she walks in and looks, and there's a swish pan
Mm,
to there's sort of like a swish pan and cut to these various animal heads. But I think the room was so cramped, and these cameras with the blimp on them they call it to keep them quiet were huge. So you really
mm,
could there's not much camera movement in the house. I think they couldn't pull off the swish pan. So what Romero does is, and presumably it's Romero's hand, he sort of puts it in front of the camera like this,
mm.
and then whips it aside. But if you go frame by frame, it's just you never read that in a normal viewing. But if you go frame by frame, you can see his fingers move, and there's something so nice about that to me. Like once you go through the movie frame by frame, like I did, you start to see all these little things that are evidence of the hands that made the movie. And particularly now, where everything's getting further and further into the field of like non-human entertainment creation, to see those hands, sometimes literally the hands, and there's the scripts all over this movie. If you know where to look, you'll see the screenplays lying on the floor everywhere. Some film lights. There are some scenes that have film lights everywhere, and you never notice it when you're watching because of the motion, what's happening. But I love all these moments because they show how handmade it was, and that is very valuable to me. More and more as I get older and the world moves on to more and more sort of toward like AI creation, to see the seams in the outfits makes me appreciate it all the more. And they feel like these little gifts where I would, go frame by frame and see a whole bunch of, it's only if you can only see it in one single frame, but you can see film equipment, and it's like wow. It's like I always compare it. I think of it as akin to if you were looking through old snapshots and you noticed for the first time in a mirror in the shot the reflection of the person taking the picture and who's maybe a loved one of yours, your mom or your sister or someone taking a picture, and you never saw them before. And you're like, wow, look how great that is. It's this sort of extra bonus picture of this person who I miss, and there they are. And I love those things in Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the thumbprint on the sculpture or the
Yeah.
brush strokes on the oil painting. I think there's a Jean-Luc
Yes.
Godard film where they are basically tracking, I think it might be Bout de Souffle, they're tracking Gene Seberg across Paris, and there's a shot in a shop window, and you can just see the whole camera unit,
Yeah.
Godard, Coulitat, everybody there. It's great, and there's another thing which sort of links to the theme of the film as well, which is, when I was growing up, everybody was alive. Cary Grant was still alive and things like that. And nowadays, everyone's kind of dead, even like all the extras and
Hmm.
pretty much. So you're always kind of watching ghosts when you're watching a film of a certain
Right.
vintage.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a interesting point. Like it's yeah. There's not many people. There's a handful of people left.
Mm.
Um, there's if you're including the zombie extras, not or the posse extras, not all of which have been discovered. There's probably you can count on two hands probably the people who are left from it. Um, so yeah, you are watching Ghosts, and that's part of why this book isn't a one of those books where I'm going to go interview everyone again.
Mm.
Part of that is because there's very few people left, and memories degrade, and you forget things, and so much has already been. These people have been interviewed for 50 years. So what was much more interesting to me was to do almost more of a cultural analysis and say, okay, so we have these 10,000 interviews that already exist in commentary tracks and video interviews and radio interviews and everything. and let's twine them together. Uh, because I'm almost more interested to hear what the people in the movie thought about it in 1968 and 1975 and 1980 than they are now when they're sort of like everything's sort of your brain naturally sort of make amends for certain things and rounds off certain corners. And I love taking all these. This is really a sort of a montage of a book or a collage where I take everything that's ever been said, and sometimes things that contradict each other, and weave them into.
Nobody does selling better than Shopify. Shopify is the home of the number one checkout on the planet. And the not so secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts go abandoned and way more sales going through. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. On the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout that Skims uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period for 3 months at shopify.com/Westwood1, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Westwood1 to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/Westwood1.
I've got good news and bad news. Here's the bad news. Most protein bars are packed with sugar and unpronounceable ingredients. The good news? There's a better option. I'm Will, and I created IQ Bar plant protein bars to empower doers like you with clean, delicious, low-sugar brain and body fuel. IQ bars are packed with 12 grams of protein, brain nutrients like magnesium and lion's mane, and zero weird stuff. And right now, you can get 20% off all IQ Bar products plus free shipping. Try our delicious IQ Bar sampler pack with 7 plant protein bars, 4 hydration mixes, and 4 enhanced coffee sticks. Clean ingredients, amazing taste, and you'll love how you feel. Refuel smarter, hydrate harder, caffeinate larger with IQ Bar.
Go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20 to get 20% off all IQ Bar products plus free shipping. Again, go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20.
One story.
Yeah, I think that's true. Rather than when they've all, it's like the police want to interview you straight away. They don't want to have you all talk together and get your
Right.
stories straight. In terms of some of the most famous parts of the film as well, we've talked a little bit about the makeup, but of course, is the sort of cannibalism that you go into, and this is, as you say in the book, this has been sort of mentioned in films before or referred to, but this is a film where it actually sort of you actually get to see it.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about that part, because I think it's probably the most infamous element of the film.
It's definitely infamous, and it definitely was shocking, and I'm sure resulted in people leaving the theater. But Walter Reed, who was the distributor of the film, and who was also at fault, no doubt, in the copyright issue, uh, knew from the start, though, that it was also the selling point. Like they wanted, if anything, they wanted more gore. They knew this was sort of that era. This was like, you know, not too far off the Herschel Gordon Lewis Blood Feast sort of era when really gore films became a thing. Um, and it works like if you just want it for that sort of exploitation purposes, like with this grossness and this draw people to the theaters, which they certainly did. That's fine, but it also works on this other level where it's like I don't think the movie works without it. Like there's this when by the time that happens, and you've seen the movie's been so great so far with so many different sort of themes wrapping around it almost when it gets to what the filmmakers called the Last Supper scene, and all the ghouls are eating up Tom and Judy, quite graphically. There's intestines, there's actual body parts that I think were mostly sheep organs. It's it leaves the realm of sort of the physical, like logical story that we've been seeing. Like the story has moved in a very, it's like a play. It's quite realistic. It's
Mm.
people on stage sort of having an argument, and it's all realism. Um, and then it just for this one sequence, all the library music that we've all the brass and violin library music goes away, and we get this weird magnetic electronic pulse that we've never heard, and suddenly we have this weird soundtrack and there's no words, and we're just getting this munching for a couple minutes. Uh, and it's sort of this weird cathartic moment where the film becomes uh, a totally different texture, and you get a sense that it's almost like film history has led us to this point, and now we're eating it alive, and everything that's going to come after, at least in the horror genre, it's going to be different now. Um, and it's really effective and really strange. And then when John Russo and other people did their 30th anniversary edition and they inserted new scenes, what the book goes into, um, they ruin it by
Mm.
inserting big gory scenes earlier in the movie. And the gore scenes they insert aren't bad, but like by doing them early, you ruin how this moment later shifts everything. It's like you've ruined it. You've already uh what's a kind word to say? You've already blown your
Yeah,
what
I know
you've
what
you had.
exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like
I
uh
understand exactly what you mean.
so it's like
You've
they
shot
they
your
ruined it, right?
arrow.
So you shot your arrow. So like it's not just gore isn't all about like what it is, it's about where it is.
Yeah.
And it by putting it earlier they screw up what is the most impactful gore scene perhaps ever. Um And it's such a brilliant marker. And everything in the rest of the film, everything in the rest of horror history is different after that.
Yeah, yeah. Spielberg had a similar experience with Jaws, where they didn't have Ben Gardner's head popping out of the hole in the boat
Mhm.
until till after they did a test screening, and they got a huge jump on the shark coming out of the water, the chumming scene. And then when they thought we need another jump like that, so they put the Ben Gardner head in, and they got a huge jump for that, but they got less of a jump for the chumming scene because you for
Yeah,
exactly what you've said. You've put them on the edge of their seats, and now they're kind of a little bit prepared for the next one coming. Um,
yeah,
I'm really interested what you say about that scene and how it changes horror history because it sort of takes horror away from drama and makes it into something much more spectacle like and I
yeah.
mean
It's interesting. Yeah,
literally visceral,
yeah,
this isn't moving the story along, this is just
right.
you know
I mean, if you think about horror and sci-fi at that period, it's all very similar. Like it's you'll have some teenagers and maybe one of their dad is a scientist, and they'll all sort of talk in these living rooms and labs, and then the giant tarantula comes out or whatever. Um, but there is this, it's very literal. Like it makes me think of again of like the last few scenes of Psycho, where
mm.
the people come out and they all talk about what has happened.
Yeah,
They talk about it
is he a
in a very
homosexual?
dry way.
He's not a
They
homosexual, no.
in a very dry way they explain everything you've just seen and what the psychological reasoning is behind all of it. That feels like very of the era to
Mm.
me of this kind of thing. But yeah, what the Last Supper scene does is it becomes almost an art film in a way that I think was probably very pleasurable to George Romero and some others on in Image 10 who was super into that stuff. Like he was into all the French filmmakers you've mentioned. Bergman was huge. He loved Bergman. Um, and these sort of more textural, less linear pieces of art were what he wanted to make. They tried to make instead of Night of the Living Dead this movie called Wine of the Fawn,
Mm.
which was a straight up Bergman riff that was very in some ways the opposite of Night of the Living Dead, but in some ways a trial run for it because it did have certain elements that particularly from like the Last Supper onward to toward the end, really reminds me a lot of Wine of the Fawn. They both have very similar endings too. So it yeah, it allows the film to become something much more experiential and less literal, less narrative based, and more just a feeling, really.
Vibes.
Vibes, indeed.
Yeah, yeah. There's something you say in the book which I think was interesting as well, and sort of takes away from the cliche of the sci-fi movies and the horror movies of this era, which is that not many, there aren't many bad decisions in the film. You know,
Yeah,
bad things happen to good people in a sense, and not, bad things happen to stupid people or,
yeah,
punished people. And even Barbara, who is this, you could see her as a sort of scream queen. She's kind of traumatized with good reason. It's very
yeah.
easy to sit in an armchair and say, "Oh, come on, pull yourself together."
It was one of the it was one of the very first things that impressed me about the movie, really young, was how everyone in the movie is basically smart and they make smart choices and they argue about them.
Mm,
But, Harry, the classic argument is upstairs or downstairs. And Harry makes really good arguments for downstairs. Ben makes really good arguments for upstairs. That fight of theirs, which is quite a long dialogue scene, I could watch that all day, because they're both making great points.
mm.
And generally, the decisions they make along the way are all smart. And that's even back then, it was such a relief, such a nice change from, well, these teens are going to go skinny dipping in this pool where there's a monster.
Yeah.
So it's a relief to see a bunch of sort of mature, intelligent adults making good decisions and debating them, in a heated way, sure, but sort of debating them intelligently. And that's, really exemplified by Dwayne Jones's Ben, who just seems like one of the most capable people you've ever seen on film. And so you're just drawn to him. Like if we were in this situation and anyone could walk through that door, we'd want it to be Ben, who comes in and just takes charge and has all this, just doesn't wait for anyone to help. He helps himself. And that's ironic because as this book goes into it, Ben actually makes some terrible decisions, like some catastrophic choices that we don't even think about. We're just so attracted to Ben that you can watch it 50 times and not really clock into the horrible decisions he's making. Now, he's not making them stupidly. They just don't turn out the way he thinks they will.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he had every reason to believe that would be okay at the time, but it just, law of unexpected consequences. Of course, the biggest law of unexpected consequences, or the biggest sort of twist of the movie, comes with the end, and this is sort of like what makes the film one of the most, I think, sharply clever films of its kind, but also kind of nihilistically depressing as well.
Yeah.
How did you respond to that ending? On well, not necessarily when you were 5 years old, but how much is that
Yeah.
ending important to the film's appeal?
Yeah, crucially important. Yeah, I don't know when I saw the ending because, when I was 5 or 6 or 7, you watch whatever parts of the movie happen to be on when you turn the channel and accidentally come across it. I'm sure I was a little older before I watched the whole thing through
Hmm.
and made sense of the ending, which I'll go ahead and spoil for those of you who haven't seen. In 50 years, Ben gets shot by the people who are supposed to be saving them. Uh, as a young person, it just felt revolutionary and unsettling, sort of unmooring that the idea that you could have a hero this heroic and kill him. Like I've never seen that before, and even today it's really rare. And when it does happen, it's usually some grand sacrifice. Like it's like this person is going down doing something amazing in a blaze of glory and this but that's not what happens here at all. It's like he doesn't die fending off zombies from Barbara and saving the day in some way and sacrificing himself. He dies in a cruel and more importantly offhand way.
Mm.
Like his death is completely, it is the most casual thing in the world. Someone who's like not even that close to the house says, "Oh, there's someone in the house," bang, and they move on like it's nothing. And that dismissiveness is what hurts so much. Like, he's a character. He's not a real person. He's a character in a movie. We can he gets killed by zombies. We're like, oh, that sucks, and but we kind of move on. But it's how he's killed. It's
Mm.
the fact that he's killed without thought, without care. He wasn't worth checking out to see if he was a zombie or not. It's just like, oh, there's a black face in the window. Let's just kill him and throw him in the fire. Um, and that's what really hurts. And that hurt then. And as I got older, it hurt more. Young, I'm certainly not thinking about the racial dynamics. I'm just thinking, oh my God, they killed my hero. But as you get older, and as I got older, it hurt more and more and more. And then you start learning about history and sort of political assassinations, and it, it it becomes a more and more painful scene the older you get, and you start to understand why it's painful and what might have led the filmmakers to come to that conclusion. And some of it was probably some sense, some vague sense of all that stuff. A lot of it was probably just shock value. They
Mm.
probably just thought, a lot of it was just them thinking this will really shock them. But it's that's easy to say, and that's easy to do if it's like a zombie attack and he dies the way everyone else dies. But no one has died so cruelly. Like no one. Imagine if the little girl Karen was killed that way, just sort of an offhanded boom. Was that little girl alive or a zombie? Who cares? Let's kill her. Like that's how they kill Ben,
Yeah.
and it's staggering. And then once you start thinking about sort of racial history in America, and you start thinking about Dwayne Jones's life, and these layers start piling up, and the ending just feels both a mirror of society and a sort of like teleportation device of where we've been and where we're going, and it's a magnificently troubling ending.
Yeah, absolutely. It sort of breaks the rules of drama as well. It's as you say, it's sort of, you know, it's almost like a ridiculous accident, but that accident in the context of a
Yes,
culture, and the context of a culture that is, as
like
you say,
like
is callous.
imagine at the end of Alien if Ripley gets rid of the alien and then trips on a marble and dies, hits her head on the, and like that's how it ends. It's like what? Like
Yeah,
something so cruel and offhand, and this of course is much worse than that because it's intentional.
yeah, absolutely. It's such an amazing ending, and it's of a piece with the film that it does so many things originally. And when I was rewatching the film and reading your book, I was also thinking of like other films that it's influenced. And of course, these themselves went on to be hugely influential. You can't help but go into that farmhouse during the day and not think of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, for instance.
Sure, yeah,
We're looking at the stuffed heads and the corpse upstairs as almost like the grandpa that
yeah,
that is found, and that head which you referred to. I think you said one of the special effects persons was really creeped out by that head. Um,
yeah. The head is a great prop. They made a couple of them, and it's essentially they bought a model kit
mm,
that I think is called, I don't remember, it's explained in the book, but I think it's called like the human skull or something
yeah,
simple like that. And it was a model kit where you put together a skull, and it was a life-size skull. And then more or less Ramiro, I think, used clay and some other things to sort of sculpt a face around it. And they actually made two, and one of them, the first one, which there are photos of, recently discovered photos of, you can glimpse that in I'm sorry, the trailer, the original trailer
mm,
time that you can see that head. And that head, for my money, is even worse. Like it is truly horrifying, and it's connected to this sort of spinal column, and it's just a horrific prop. But yeah, the head they end up using is also horrific enough, and I believe it was Gary Striner, so not a special effects artist, but he mostly worked on sound, and I think he might have still been in high school, maybe just out of high school when they shot the movie. And yeah, he was always creeped out by it because it just sat there for most of the shoot at the top of the stairs. Creeped me out for sure.
Absolutely. So we're coming to the end of today's episode, but I'd like to ask you that you're sort of for the looking into the future for all the films that have come since, and as I say, this has been hugely influential. What's films would you point to that that you personally think, oh, that's a really good sort of legacy from the film that it inspired
Ugh.
this filmmaker or this
So what films ha have been inspired by Night of the Living Dead? Is
yeah,
that what you're asking?
yeah.
God, it is
That
that's
you
a tough one.
which you like, which you think, not like this is it's made there's been quite a few copies which have not been as good, or
Sure.
we could have done without, but
God, I don't know. That's a tough one. It just has inspired so many. I'm trying to think of one like that feels like really particularly inspired by it. I feel like I don't I'm gonna the short answer is I don't have a good answer for you, but I
okay.
feel like it wouldn't be a horror movie. I feel like um that, and this insight came from this guy Adam Hart, who I know, who wrote a book on Romero's unmade projects, and he was saying that there's this play that Romero was in as a young man called The Connection, and there was a movie version of it that was made that's as far as I know the very first found footage movie, and it's just about these sort of junkies sort of waiting around for their connection to show up, and they're in this apartment and they just kind of squabble and talk. And his insight was that play that Romero acted in ended up being the biggest influence on Night of the Living Dead. And the Night of the Living Dead is basically the connection with some zombies at the beginning and the end. And I think that I think Romero or Night of the Living Dead's influence is probably mostly felt in those kind of movies that are uh, these one location or very few location dramas. Like I'm not saying Glengarry Glen Ross was inspired by Night of the Living Dead, but maybe it was. Maybe in some those kind of movies where it's
Mm.
like people caught in what I like to think of as a meat grinder. I always call them meat grinder movies that you're just like stuck in this space with these people you don't like or disagreeing with. Um, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? Those kind of movies. All these sort of Bug,
Oh
um,
yeah, Reservoir
Richard
Dogs.
Yeah, Reservoir Dog, Richard Linklater's Tape, all these kind of like one location movies, which are my favorite kind of movies. And why are they my favorite kind of movies? Well, it's probably Night of the Living Dead. Um, I love these limited location movies, and part of the reason I love them is that it gives you, or Tarantino's Western,
Oh,
um,
Hateful Eight.
Hateful Eight. I love these movies because they're sort of easy in a way. There's not a spectacle, so you're all the stuff that you can normally do to like impress audiences are sort of not options anymore. And all you can do is like, can I wring drama out of this extremely limited palette? And it really puts them to the test to see if they can do it. And so my guess is that maybe Night didn't directly affect some of these movies, but it in an accumulative way did. Like Night influenced these other things, which influenced these other things, and then led to how we're still getting these kinds of movies.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's a great observation, and it's a great way of actually going back and rewatching Night of the Living Dead with that in mind, with the sort of non horror aspect
Yeah.
in mind. Final question. Book recommendation, please.
A book recommendation.
Yeah, film book, because Writers on
A
Film,
film book.
we promote books about cinema. So any
Okay.
book you
Um, there is last year, I think I read and this is very much in subject of what we're talking about. I read a book by Joe Madry called The Soul of Wes Craven. That's a
mm,
biography of Wes Craven. And it's really great. It's really great. It deals with uh again, sort of like this Adam Hart book I was talking about. It deals with like the stuff he made, but also the stuff he didn't make or wasn't
Mm.
allowed to make. And that's such a big part of the Romero story, is that he really had no interest in being a horror filmmaker. He, the first things he does after Night of the Living Dead is make There's Always Vanilla, which is like a drama, I guess, a
Yeah.
romance, So Wes Craven's story follows a lot of the George Romero trajectory, where these men who had really not a lot of interest in the genre um, got stuck in the genre. And I think that's why they became such huge hits, huge stars, is that they were interested in other things.
Mm.
And I think, I feel like I can always tell when I see a horror movie or read a horror novel by someone who only consumes horror media. I can just tell. Like there's a
Yeah.
feedback loop to it. But when you get people like Wes Craven or George Romero, who are after completely other things and are sort of forced to filter it through horror, that's when things get interesting. Like, Romero was never, very rarely did he care about scaring you. Like that was not what his movies. Night is an exception, but very few of his movies are very scary. Anyway, Soul of Wes Craven is really good, and has that kind of access to his archives, where you see all these things that you never knew he made, or he, was desperate to make and never allowed.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant. I'm going to have to put that on my reading list. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Daniel. And thanks so much for the book. I really enjoyed it. I'll put a link on the show notes for people who want to order it. And thanks for the conversation.
Oh, absolutely. It was fun.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.